It's possible you could need an aiming solution other than your optic. I'll tell you what that might be, things you need to consider, and how exactly you might accomplish that. If you're not subscribed already, it would be cool if you were, and don't forget to feed the algorithm down below. You want to buy a laser for your rifle, but deep down you know you're buying it just to impress other men and take cool photos with it. And if you're like me, you also have a hard time justifying spending money on something you can't practically use. And when I say practical, I'm talking about using a laser in defense of yourself or others. This is the first video I've ever made where I'm telling you something you can do, but you definitely shouldn't default to doing, which is using your weapon light as an aiming device. There could be situations where you might need to do that, and some of those scenarios are more probable than others. All that aside, there's a reason I have a disclaimer on my channel which basically says you shouldn't be doing anything you see on my channel in real life without building your own competency through training. Which means if you find yourself in any of the situations I'm going to explain and you attempt to utilize your weapon light as an aiming device after watching this video, that's just not a good idea. If you have a reputable optic by a reputable brand, I just haven't heard of sudden catastrophic failures happening, but I'm sure it's happened once before. What's most likely to occur is a loose battery compartment or a dead battery. Both of those issues should be mitigated through PCCs or PCIs, pre-combat checks or pre-combat inspections. And the way to say that in which everyone will understand, just checking to make sure all of your stuff works properly. Most optics, if not all of them, aren't simply going to go from working to not working. And instead, if your battery is dying, there should be some indication in the brightness of your reticle telling you that you need to change your battery. I also understand that people can be lazy and certainly at times are willing to roll the dice in hopes it will make it to the end of their shift. It's also possible, but not probable, that you deploy with your rifle and on your way to getting to the problem, you somehow manage to break your optic. What's really important about all the things I just mentioned is that those are situations where you've actually deployed with your rifle and didn't realize your optic wasn't functioning until you were presented with a lethal threat. Meaning you were expecting your reticle to be there in that moment and it wasn't. Because if you knew that your reticle wasn't functioning properly before you deployed with it, I wouldn't even bother taking your rifle. It's probably a better idea to dedicate to your pistol at that point. Even though I'm giving you an alternative aiming option, the practical portion of this video will demonstrate why you still shouldn't choose to default to your weapon light. And that's because the distance between you and the threat will probably be unknown, and the farther away from the threat you get, the more impractical this idea becomes. The most probable and most likely situation where you conduct a ready up drill to engage an immediate threat and don't see your reticle is because the brightness of your weapon light is drowning out the brightness of your reticle. Personally, I'm a big proponent of using my weapon light in both day and night, but that's a topic for another video. For the most part, you'll only run into this issue when working in confined spaces or a CQB environment. You could be moving around vehicles in a parking garage or clearing down a hallway. This problem occurs because when you decide at what brightness you want your reticle to be, you're adjusting your brightness for whatever conditions and environment you're currently in, and likely not considering the environments that you could be in. For example, I load up my patrol car in a parking garage, so when I check the brightness of my reticle, it can appear much brighter than it actually would be as soon as I'm outside underneath the sun. I dial up my brightness pretty bright for this specific reason. I would rather my reticle be there when I need it to be than be worried about a negligible amount of precision because my reticle is taking up more space on the threat. Where I'm at right now, it is lit. I wouldn't call this underneath the sun, but if you are underneath the sun, you're probably okay. I would also argue that even if you are, I would use my weapon light on a surface that's near me to determine whether or not I could still see my reticle. For this optic in particular, and most optics for me, I like to go all the way as high as I can and then back it off 1 or 2 clicks, and for me, that's good. So if you're loading up your vehicle, you're out in an open parking lot, point it at the ground, make sure it's unloaded. And if that's not doing it for you, more of a glossy surface or a reflective surface is even better, because most walls inside a residence, if we're doing CQB, are gloss or semi-gloss, which means they're gonna be a little bit more reflective. And so you can use the quarter panel of your car to shine your light. And if your optic is disappearing and you can brighten your reticle, then I would consider doing that. The major consideration in all of this and a major factor is whether or not you have a good weapon light to begin with. This is a Mod Light OKW 29631. I've had it for 3 years, I think, and the reason I bought this light was because of the narrow beam that it provides. That just happens to be a benefit should you need it and if it's available to you. I bought it for other tactical reasons why I prefer narrow beam. That's a whole nother video in and of itself. But if you have a stream light or some other off-brand light, then this is probably going to become extremely impractical for you. Determining whether this is even a possibility for you at all is going to come down to your proximity to the target and what you're seeing with the effects on the target in regards to what your light is affording you the opportunity to do. So the closer I am to the target, the narrower my beam is, and the farther away I get from the target, the bigger my beam becomes, making it more probable and more accurate and more precise. The closer I am and the farther away I get, the less probable this idea becomes. So as I'm closer to the target, of course, if we're that close or within 3 yards, point shooting is really, okay and viable. And we shouldn't be taking hostage shots, so necessarily our offset maybe isn't a big deal, but just like we have our sight over bore, you're also going to have the offset of your light in relation to your muzzle as well. So that is going to be a consideration if we're trying to be precise. I'll shoot this static, we'll look at my shots, and then I'll run through this kind of moving around and shooting at different targets, and what you're willing to accept on the target as long as you know the capability of your light and the capabilities of yourself. Right here, we could call this 7 yards or so. So we'll go ahead and fire 2 rounds. Look, I'm looking over top of my sights. I am offsetting just a little bit for my light in relationship to my bore. Right here. Here, it's probably about 10 yards or so. So we'll go ahead and engage with 2 rounds, looking over top, adjusting slightly for the offset. Malfunction. One more. That one was a little high. That was just kind of on me. This round was right next to the other 2, and that one I just kind of rushed it, to be honest with you. Okay, I would say this is definitely 15 yards, so we're going to go ahead and engage again. 2 rounds. We're looking here, and I think here. Every time that I shoot at a target, I'm always aiming for the high A zone, which is that black square there, and I really don't accept anything other than that when I'm training. But if I'm using my weapon light and I want to accept a shot on target that is not the high A zone, maybe the low A zone or even the C zone, what might that look like? So I'm going to shoot the remaining rounds that I have in here by putting my light on the target by still acknowledging a little bit of the offset here. And again, not looking through the sights. One here, one here, one here, one here. 1, 2, 3, maybe right here, somewhere in here. But it looks like they're all in the A zone. Now I'm going to do a run through. I have some targets set up in this house and across the way at that other house over there and at a vehicle over there. This is purely a demonstration of using my weapon light, and I think the farthest target I have is definitely 15 yards or just a little bit more. I forgot to mark one on here, but got one here, here, here. Looking at this target here, these are all marked here and here. 1 and 2 here, and 1 and 2 here. Like I said, I'm always aiming for the high A zone, which I think was reflective in my shots on these targets for the most part. And I'm also shooting with the consideration that meat moves when you shoot it. People don't stay still, and they usually don't stay still after you hit them with the first round. Let's see what happens just for the heck of it if I am simply accepting my light being on the target and getting hits on the target, regardless if it's the A zone or the D zone will try to stay, or the A zone or the C zone will try to stay out of the D zone. Looks like 2 in the high A zone to the right, 1 above the high A zone, and the other one almost center in the A zone there. 2 here, high A zone. Ooh, and these ones were real high. So these are really definitely no good. I think you can get a good idea from those demonstrations of what can be accomplished. If you noticed on the more reflective targets, my light kind of drowns out and makes it more difficult for me in terms of accuracy. And on the cardboard target, it's a little bit easier. My light kind of stays more or less whole, the beam stays more or less whole, and that cardboard target is more in line with what you could expect to see in the real world, being it somebody's shirt or something like that. But you can see how those two things differ. All of that being said, I will reiterate that if you think that you're going to watch this video and be able to go do this in real life, it's just not going to happen. Not even that because you're maybe not capable of doing it, but because you haven't trained yourself in situations that more closely replicate real life to move from that moment of, oh, it's not there, let me make that mental switch to something I actually do have in that moment. It's definitely necessary to go out on the range and try this with your light in the daytime. If you have a powerful enough light, you can definitely do this in the daytime, at least within 7 yards. It gets more difficult the farther back that you get, but you should be able to do this on the range first. Then when you get in situations in training, put yourself in situations in training that cause you to have to actually move to that so that you could be expected of actually doing that yourself in a real life situation. You could tap on this photo if I haven't convinced you to subscribe to the channel already, and don't forget to leave a small sacrifice for the algorithm down below.